And so, when Asahina-san reappeared, she was dressed in the most appropriate attire for the occasion. She wore a sleeveless shirt with bright blue and white colors, coupled with a miniskirt. She even had 2 yellow pom-poms. Such an impeccable cheerleader. Where did she even get this costume from? Yet another mystery. She looks gorgeous, Kunikita said enjoyably.
Guru, can I take some pictures of you like that?
Tsuruya-san giggled and took out her camera phone. By the way, Haruhi was also dressed as a cheerleader. Wouldn't it be fine if only she wore it? That thought didn't cross my mind for a second. To be honest, Asahina-san just looked too cute in that cheerleader costume. Though, she'd look cute in anything.
I wonder if you'd look better with a ponytail.
Haruhi caressed Asahina-san's hair and attempted to tie it behind her head. When she noticed I was watching, she scowled her mouth like a duck's beak and gave up on tying the hair.
Then, let's get to work.
What do we do?
We do this!
Haruhi went behind Asahina-san and lifted her weak, pale arms, and then began to swing them up and down. Such unbelievable choreography. Haruhi yelled loudly by Asahina-san's ear.
Scream! Scream loudly!
Oh. Everyone, please do your best and score a run. Everyone, do your best.
Asahina-san was forced to yell in such a pretentious way. At least Taniguchi was fired up by all this. He eagerly swung the bat, preparing to get on base. However, I have a feeling no matter how hard he tries, he's never going to hit the opponent's pitches. As expected, Taniguchi returned to the bench in no time. And so, the batter's position was rotated and Haruhi once again went to the batting zone, still dressed as a cheerleader. It was quite a feast for the eyes when Haruhi and Asahina once dressed up as bunny girls, and right now, their costumes were just as distracting. Our opponents didn't really know where to look. Asahina-san was perfect in every way, while besides her personality, Haruhi was equally flawless in both her looks and figure. Haruhi took full advantage of the opponent's pitcher's error and made a hit, striking the ball towards center field past second base. During the opponent's scramble to retrieve the ball, Haruhi had already taken third base. The third baseman's eyes were looking in a suspicious angle when Haruhi slid in. The next batter was a pretty cheerleader girl whose charm far surpassed Haruhi's. Asahina-san held the bat with trepidation. Under the watchful glare of many guys, myself included, her face blushed furiously red in embarrassment. Such a great scene. The pitcher was so distracted he could only throw a weak pitch, but Asahina-san still didn't swing her bat. The opponent even threw an easy-to-hit curveball.
Yeah.
Her eyes were shut when she finally swung the bat, so a ball that could have been easily hit wasn't even dinged. And so, Asahina-san was once again one pitch away from being struck out. At that moment, Haruhi began swinging her arms while standing on third base. What was she doing?
She seems to be making a signal.
Did we even decide on signals?
No, but from this situation, I can more or less imagine Suzumiya-san would resort to using signals. She's probably trying to call for a squeeze.
Signing for a squeeze with 2 outs? Even a lame duck coach wouldn't be that stupid.
I deduce that she probably believes the chances of Asahina-san scoring a run is near 0, so she decided to employ a squeeze play, which would result in the infielders making an error. Or perhaps if Asahina-san does manage to hit the ball, she might be able to do something as well.
Yeah, but it looks like our opponent already figured that out. The infielders had all gone into their defensive positions and were prepared. What signal was Haruhi making? It just looked like she was signaling to hit the ball. In the end, the squeeze play failed miserably. Asahina-san didn't even know what a squeeze play was, so she could only tilt her head and wonder what Haruhi's signals meant. She was eventually struck out. Asahina-san lowered her head and returned to the bench with the look of a puppy who had just enraged her master. Haruhi called her over.
Mikuru-chan, come over here and close your jaws tightly.
Haruhi pinched the sides of Asahina-san's trembling cheeks with both hands.
This is your punishment. Get over here and let everyone see that cute face of yours.
Are you an idiot? I knocked on Haruhi's head with my loudspeaker. It's your fault for making such weird signals. Why don't you go steal home plate yourself, you moron? Suddenly, there was a beep. Koizumi took out his cell phone from his tracksuit pocket and frowned after looking at the LCD screen. Asahina-san looked shocked and pressed her left ear with her hand while looking off into the distance. Nagato turned and looked vertically upwards into the sky. When everyone else went to their defensive positions, Koizumi called me back.
Something's come up.
I really don't want to know, but I'll hear what you have to say.
A sealed dimension has appeared. Probably the largest we've ever seen, and it's expanding at a very rapid rate.
A sealed dimension. A gray world which I was way too familiar with. How could I forget? Thanks to being trapped in that gloomy dimension, I now have to carry a mental scar for the rest of my life. Koizumi continued to smile.
That's how it is. Sealed dimensions are created as a result of the pressure being subconsciously emitted by Suzumiya-san. Right now, Suzumiya-san is very frustrated, which explains the appearance of one. Unless her mood improves, this sealed dimension is going to keep expanding, and the avatars with which you're so familiar will wreak havoc on everything.
You're saying Haruhi's getting so frustrated from her team losing that she's creating a whole stupid dimension?
Seems to be the case.
She's so full of it! Koizumi made no comment, but simply smiled at me. I sighed and said, "This is so annoying." Koizumi looked at me and said,
What's the point in saying this now? You sound as though it has nothing to do with you. This is a serious incident, and you have a lot to do with it. Weren't our positions decided by lottery?
"Yeah, so?"
And as a result, you were chosen to bat cleanup.
In case you haven't noticed, I'm not exactly happy about it.
Suzumiya-san wouldn't care less about whether you felt glad or pressured by it. The thing is that you were chosen as the cleanup.
Can you please explain in a language I can understand?
Simple. Because this is what Suzumiya-san wishes. That's why you were chosen as the fourth batter. This is not a coincidence. She wishes for you to perform the role of cleanup. But right now she's very disappointed that you have failed to meet her expectations.
Sorry for being such a disappointment.
I'm troubled by it as well. At this rate, Suzumiya-san's mood would continue to deteriorate, and inversely, the sealed dimension would continue to expand.
Then, what should I do?
Do well in the game. If possible, make a long hit, or better still, a home run, especially those that fly very far off. How about scoring a very long home run, and even smashing the scoreboard at the far side of the field?
Don't be ridiculous. I only score home runs in video games. How am I supposed to make such powerful swings?
We all sincerely hope that you can do it.
It doesn't matter how much you hope. I'm neither a god nor an elf. How was I supposed to find a solution?
Then try your best to prevent our opponents from ending the game within this inning.
Remember, in this tournament, when the score difference is 10 runs, the game is over.
If the game ends here, then it'll be the end for this world as well. No matter what, we must limit their score in this half to within 2 runs.
Koizumi said all of this in a very serious manner, which didn't fit the atmosphere. The second half of the third inning began. Haruhi walked towards the pitcher's mound in her cheerleader costume. Asahina-san also wore her cheerleader costume and went to the right field. Haruhi revealed her arms and legs without hesitation, and ignored any runners on base while still throwing pitches from the set. The first batter struck the ball and it flew right in front of Nagato's face. She made the out, but she didn't even look at the fly ball made by the second batter. When the ball finally rolled from the left field into the center field, he had already run to third base. Haruhi's pitches were still full of energy, but as she kept throwing fastballs, they were bound to get hit. As expected from the defending champions, they then scored 2 runs by making 2 hits and taking advantage of an error by Kimikita. The situation was becoming critical. There were already runners on first and second. Just one more run and this game would be over, and then who knows what would happen to the world. Whack! The ball flew high and drifted towards right field. Asahina-san stood at where the ball would land and curled herself in fear. There was no time to think. I ran with my life for the umpteenth time towards right field. I've got to catch that ball! I leapt and caught the ball. The ball barely landed in the tip of my glove. I quickly threw the ball with all my force to Taniguchi, who was standing at the second base. The 2 runners thought this was going to be a long-distance hit and were already running. Taniguchi quickly stepped on second. Double play! Somehow managed to survive this. How exhausting.
Nice play.
I enjoyed the praising look of Asahina-san while Taniguchi, Kimikita, and my sister and Saruya-san all mopped my head with their gloves. I gave them a V sign while looking at Haruhi's reaction, and saw her carrying a troubled expression as she looked at the scoreboard, which was basically a movable whiteboard. I sat on the bench and covered my face with my towel. Koizumi then sat next to me.
Continuing where we left off,
I don't really want to hear this now.
there is a solution to this. When you and Suzumiya-san went to that world, how did you manage to return?
Like I said, stop making me think of that again.
If you use the method that you used back then, we might be able to improve the situation.
I refuse.
I knew you would say that. Then how about this? It'll be fine as long as we win this game. I've already thought of a good idea. It should be able to work since she has the same concerns we do.
Koizumi grinned softly and headed towards Nagato, who was standing in the white on-deck circle staring blankly into the distance. He then mumbled something into Nagato's ear. Her short hair seemed to wave slightly. Suddenly, Nagato turned her head and looked at me with her emotionless eyes. Does that mean she agreed to do it? She nodded her head like a puppet whose strings had just snapped and walked in strides towards the batter's box. I turned my gaze leftwards and saw Asahina-san staring at Nagato.
Nagato-san, she's finally...
She's finally what?
Nagato-san seems to be chanting incantations.
Incantations? What the hell's that?
That's classified information.
Asahina-san gestured a quick apology as she lowered her head. That's fine. It can't be helped if it's classified information. Looks like that surreal stuff is about to happen again. I had first-hand experience with Nagato's incantations. It was a very hot May evening. If Nagato hadn't barged into the classroom that day, I would now be taking a nap in the ground. At that time, Nagato chanted something very quickly and defeated the person who was trying to kill me. Oh yeah, Nagato was still wearing her glasses back then. What was she trying to do this time? Then I understood at once. The bat swung. It was a home run. Nagato seemed to have just casually swung the bat and struck the center of the pitcher's fastball. The ball flew high up above the field and finally disappeared at the back wall. I turned my gaze towards my teammates. Koizumi grinned elegantly and nodded to me. Asahina-san looked stiff but not surprised, while my little sister and Tsuruya-san simply exclaimed. The others simply dropped their jaws and went into shock. Of course, it was the same for the other team. Haruhi leapt joyously towards home plate and tapped on the helmet of Nagato, who had just circled the bases with a blank expression.
That was amazing! Where did you get so much power from?
Haruhi pulled and twisted Nagato's tiny arms excitedly. Nagato still remained expressionless and allowed Haruhi to have her way. A little while later, Nagato walked towards the bench and handed the bat to me.
This
She pointed to the old baseball bat and said,
alteration and boost attribute data.
What's that mean? Nagato looked at me for some time and said,
Homing mode.
She said only those words and walked back to the bench and sat in the corner, picking up a very thick hardcover book lying by the side and began to read it. The score was now 9-1. It was the first half of the fourth inning. Looks like this will be the last inning. The opposing pitcher still hadn't recovered from the previous shock, but still managed to throw a good fastball at me. I finally understood the meaning of Nagato's words. Whoa! The bat moved on its own. My arms and shoulders were simply dragged along by it. Whack. I originally thought I merely scratched the ball, but I never would have imagined the ball would have rode the wind and flew far up. It flew over the wall and lawn and landed on the baseball field next door. It was a home run. My jaw dropped. Homing mode was incredible. I threw away the bat, which was now installed with an automatic homing device and acceleration booster, and began to run. As I passed second base, I turned to look at the bench. Haruhi's hands were raised up, and when her eyes met, she quickly turned away. You could at least celebrate a little, like Tsuruya-san and my sister. I saw Taniguchi and Kurikita looking shocked once again, while Asahina-san and Koizumi remained speechless, and our opponents simply exchanged glances with each other. I felt really sorry for them, but the shock suffered by our opponents refused to wear out. Next, my sister walked shakily towards the batter's box. As the helmet was too big for her, nearly half her face was covered up, so I can't really blame her for not being able to maintain her balance. The trump card I specifically kept for losing now swung her bat, hitting the ball and whacking it over the fence. In other words, she also hit a home run. There has to be a limit to how ridiculous things can get. For an 11-year-old 5th grade schoolgirl to whack a ball which was thrown by a college student at a speed of 130 kilometers per hour over the fence, in reality, that was just plain impossible.
That's amazing!
Haruhi never doubted this twisted reality for a second. She took my sister's hand and danced around wildly with her while smiling happily.
That's an incredible talent! You have a bright future ahead. You're gonna be in the professional baseball league in no time.
My sister let Haruhi swing her around madly while screaming joyously. How should I say this? The score was now 9-3. I was now sitting on the bench, wrapping my head with my hands. Our home run onslaught continued. The score was now 9-7. 7 continuous runs in one inning. I guess we've set a new tournament record. After hitting a blast, Taniguchi ran back to the bench. He and Kunikita began discussing their plans for joining the baseball team and taking them all the way to Koshien, while Tsuruya-san slapped the shoulder of Asahina-san, who suddenly felt nervous for no reason, while laughing loudly. I'm glad the three of them are so simple-minded.
Now, it's time to show them what we're made of.
Shouldn't that be the pitcher's line? I was beginning to grow tired of the whacking noises, as the balls kept flying towards the scoreboard and bouncing off of it. The score was now 9-8. Until now, the opponent has switched in 3 pitchers. I'm sure they didn't want my sympathy, but I still decided to pity them. Poor guys. The batting order rotated once again, and Asahina-san, Nagato, and I all made consecutive home runs. Finally, the score was reversed 9-11 in our favor. 11 consecutive home runs. I began to think that this needed to be put to a stop quickly, since I've discovered that our opponents weren't looking at us. Instead, their gazes were concentrated on the baseball bat. Could they have mistaken it for some magic bat? I guess it's natural for them to think that way. Before handing the bat to my sister, the next batter, I brought it to Nagato, who was reading her book at the corner of the bench. Okay, that's enough for now. It was rare to see Nagato's expressionless face blinking so many times. She normally blinks every 10 seconds or so.
I see.
She then placed her tiny fingers over the tip of the bat I was holding and quickly chanted something. I couldn't hear what was being said, but even if I did, I wouldn't be able to understand it. After quickly withdrawing her fingers from the bat, Nagato said nothing and quietly returned to her position on the bench and opened her book again. When my sister Koizumi and Kudakita went up to strike again, it was as though their previous home runs had never happened, as they all missed the ball and were struck out consecutively. In fact, this was all due to cheating through advanced technology. Oh, I forgot to mention, there's a time limit of 90 minutes for the games in this tournament. This rule was inevitable if the organizers wanted to complete all the matches within the day. And so, there would be no next inning for this game. We'll definitely win if it ends in the second half of the 4th inning. Do we really have to win this?
We have to. My colleagues have called. They say thanks to our efforts, the sealed dimensions seem to have ceased expanding. Though it may have stopped growing, the avatars are still in there. So we still need to think of an idea to clean up this mess. But it's definitely good news that the sealed dimension has stopped expanding.
However, if our opponents managed to turn things around, it would all be over. I wasn't prepared to use my imagination to guess what mood Haruhi would be in then.
That's why I have a suggestion.
Koizumi revealed his white teeth. They were so bright I would recommend them for a toothpaste commercial. He whispered his suggestion in my ear. Are you serious?
I'm very serious. If we are to keep the loss in runs at a minimum, this is the only way.
Okay, I have to explain this once again. What the hell?